Hey, good evening, guys. I just wanted to touch on an interview I saw today, which was quite surprising. Richard Gage, formerly the director of architects and engineers, went on a show by Seth Holehouse of Man in America podcast. And what did they talk about? Well, they talked about the Canestraro files. Believe it or not, hey, how about that? So let's see what they had to say during this video. It's only 10 minutes long, so I just it was not a long video, but they only talked about the Canestraro files for 10 minutes. Let's see what they have to say.
But then the information that came out just this past week, I'll pull this up right here. Now, this is an article. Now, it's not CNN, right? But so RT, Russian Times. This is explosive information, in my opinion. I mean, to not pardon the pun there, but so special service, so declassified Guantanamo court filing suggests some 9/11 hijackers were CIA agents.
This is the Russia Today title. I had a back and forth with people on the heading. The heading is wrong because the file never states that the 9/11 hijackers were CIA agents. First of all, there's no such thing as an agent in the CIA. They're called officers. But at no point did the document ever state that, or did anyone state in the document that the hijackers were CIA agents. They were going to be, they were using Saudi intelligence operatives to become friendly with Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi in the hopes of obtaining intelligence to give it back to the CIA to find out what they were up to. So that's far cry from being an actual agent or even an informant. Maybe later on down the stretch, because that was the goal of Kofor Black, the director of the Counterterrorism Center. He wanted to get Al-Qaeda informants, people that were Al-Qaeda, but that they would work with the CIA. So, but you don't get to that point unless you really get to become friendly with the people that you're trying to turn. But evidently, in the pen bomb investigation by the FBI, and later on Operation Encore, Nawaf al-Hazmi had suspicions about one Saudi intelligence operative, Omar al-Bayoumi, who actually helped Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi get an apartment in San Diego. And he paid for their 2 months rent, helped them get a driver's license, at the DMV, all under their real names. But nevertheless, Nawaf al-Hazmi said he suspected Omar al-Bayoumi as being a spy for Saudi Arabia. So even if they were going to try to flip them, it wouldn't have worked anyway.
So I'll read a little bit from this article because this is really significant. So an explosive court filing from the Guantanamo Military Commission, a court considering the cases of defendants accused of carrying out the 9/11 terrorist attacks in New York, has seemingly confirmed the unthinkable. So this document was showing in this court filing was showing that there were FBI agents that were testifying and saying that all this evidence they had led them to believe the CIA was involved with this. So let's go ahead and scroll down a little bit here. It's talking about two of the men, two of the hijackers and how they came to America and everything. But then getting into some of the other texts I want to read, that basically the CIA officers, okay, let's see, I got down here. So they had them named, or sorry, the FBI officers, right? So one of them was CS-23. There's different names for them. So in this report, though, it says CS-23 recounted how the CIA repeatedly lied and stonewalled the FBI in its investigations into Bayoumi, which Bayoumi was one of the people that actually aided these two hijackers, right? So furthermore...
He's a Saudi official, actually, too.
Oh, yeah, that too.
He was paid.
There you go. So furthermore, CS-23 was certain that the CIA used its liaison relationship with the Saudi intelligence services to attempt to recruit Hazmi and Mihdhar, two of the hijackers, and circumvent laws prohibiting the agency from conducting spy operations on U.S. soil. So it continues.
And that's 18 months before 9/11.
There you go. says this account was backed up by another FBI investigator, CS3, who further claims that Biomi set up bank accounts and was renting an apartment for the two hijackers in San Diego. Him doing that was done at the behest of the CIA. I think I have one more. That's okay. So there's some other information in this article, and I can't read the whole thing, but basically, and you can explain this to me, but my understanding of this, what this article was showing us, is that the FBI was investigating for potential terrorist attacks. They were also going against it and trying to stop these things from happening. But their investigations repeatedly met with walls when they got into the CIA areas of this. And then even the higher up
And by the way,
levels,
the military also had projects like Able Danger, who was doing the same thing, and they were shut down when the Bush administration came into power.
Interesting. And so it's not
And
like
they were successfully infiltrating Al Qaeda and had a huge database.
Well, there's a little bit of a mistake here by Gage. Yes, Able Danger actually was run by two men, General Peter Shoemaker and General Hugh Shelton, and it was done on behalf of the U.S. Army and the Defense Intelligence Agency. And there were 5 people that were picked for this operation, and one of the people to lead it was Anthony Schaefer, using his Stratus Ivy unit, and then you had people like Eric Kleinsmith, who worked at the Land Information Warfare's Activities Division. And what they did was they used metadating techniques to gather as much information from public and closed source information, private information, regarding terrorist operatives inside the United States. And they found that there was 2 groups. One was a Brooklyn group led by Mohammed Atta, and the other group led by Omar Abdel Rahman. So there was they found 2 groups, and later on they ordered the information to be deleted because they said you can't collect information on U.S. citizens, because they deemed Mohammed Atta, Marwan al-Sheikh, and Ziad Jar as U.S. citizens. Yet later on, when there was a Senate Judiciary Committee headed by Arlen Specter in 2006, which was actually instigated by Carl Levin, who's a Republican senator out of Pennsylvania, in which Schaefer actually went to Levin anonymously and told him about this project, this operation, because Schaefer actually got his security clearance taken away by the Department of Defense because he gave sensitive information to the director of the 9/11 Commission at the time, Philip Zelikow, in Afghanistan, because Zelikow heard about this operation. I don't know how, but they interviewed Schaefer. And Schaefer told him about the Able Danger, and the Department of Defense was not pleased with that, and they took away Schaefer's security clearance. Nevertheless, Levin found out and forced a Senate Judiciary to look into Department of Defense malfeasance. And William Dugan, who is a representative for the Department of Defense, actually said under oath that Mohammed Atta should not have been considered a U.S. citizen. And if that was the case, the information should not have been deleted. All this information that was collected under the Able Danger program regarding Mohammed Atta, Marwan al-Sheikh, and Ziad Jar. And I think they had like 5 gigabytes of information at the time. So that's what that was about. It wasn't about that they were infiltrating Al Qaeda. They weren't doing that. They were just collecting metadata on terrorist groups inside the United States.
On them.
Interesting. Okay. And so what it just to look at this, and for a lot of people that maybe denied that the U.S. government, that the 9/11 was an inside job or whatever, but here we have these declassified documents, FBI agents testifying, saying that they believe that the CIA was behind multiple people that were involved in the hijacking, and that the CIA knew in advance that the 9/11 attack was going to happen and prevented the FBI from getting involved.
First of all, just a correction here, Seth Holehouse, if you're ever watching this, at no point in the document did it ever state that the CIA knew about the operation, the planes operation, 9/11. It never even talks about the planes operation. They talk about the CIA and Saudi intelligence working together illegally inside the United States, because by law, the CIA is not allowed to conduct operations inside the United States. And what they did was they were using the Saudis to basically monitor Al-Qaeda operatives, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, and later on Hani Hanjour, and find out what they had, what they were doing. Now, at no point anywhere in the document, and I did a 3-part series on this, did the CIA claim that they knew, or did anybody from the FBI or the CIA or the 9/11 Commission say that the CIA have foreknowledge about the 9/11 attacks? No point. What the CIA did was withhold information about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi being shared to the FBI and the Department of State about their arrival in the United States and having U.S. visas. That was what they withheld. Now, if you're going to say that the CIA knew about 9/11 in advance, I'd like to know where you got that information from, because it's not in the Canestraro files. So I don't know where you got that from.
So I mean, to me, this is really damning evidence, but what do you make of this information?
Well, here's what the CIA is going to come back and say. We were trying to stop the attack. We knew about it, so we were assisting Bayoumi to assist these hijackers so we could get involved in it and stop it at the last minute. And guess what?
I don't know where you get this from, Richard, because that's not the case at all. In fact, what the CIA did was basically shield Omar al-Bayoumi and Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi from the FBI and local state law enforcement and this Department of State about the operation that was taking place in the United States, because it's illegal. Lieutenant could get fired. He's the director. It doesn't end with him. Richard Gage could get fired. He's the actual chief of station of the Bin Laden issue unit. Tom Wilshire, he's the deputy chief of the Bin Laden issue station. He was the one who ordered the withholding of information that could have been helpful to the FBI regarding Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, because Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi were seen at a Malaysia summit meeting in January of 2000 with the alleged mastermind of the coal bombing, Tawfiq bin Attash, known as Khalid. If the FBI made that connection of Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi with Tawfiq bin Attash, they can actually open a criminal, not an intelligence investigation, but a criminal one, and arrest Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. And that was one of the reasons why the CIA withheld that information from the FBI, because they didn't want the FBI to interfere in their operation, and also they didn't want the FBI to detain or arrest Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, not because that they knew about the 9/11 operation that Holehouse basically assumes, or you assume, Gage. That's not the case. But I know where you're coming from, Gage. This is not your field, and I've told you many times that if you're going to talk about the geopolitics of 9/11, you're going to have to stay away from certain people. But
what they did at the last minute, they called the FBI and they said, we lost them. So now they've shifted the blame.
This is, they didn't call the FBI. Actually, there was a meeting, a principals meeting, that was Richard Gage actually told the principals, leading members of the intelligence and Department of Defense, that we lost track of them, because when they left the Malaysia summit meeting, they went to Bangkok. Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi traveled with Tawfiq bin Attash. Tawfiq bin Attash actually used a pseudonym and traveled with them to Bangkok, and they were going to use a connect flight to the United States, but Tawfiq bin Attash actually went to Thailand because he was actually giving money to somebody in that country. And that's when Richard Gage said, we lost track of them. Now, this is a smart move by Gage, because he could basically say, hey, we don't know where they are. Meanwhile, they always knew where they were, but they weren't the only agency that knew that. The NSA also knew this, because the NSA was also monitoring Nawaf al-Hazmi, Khalid al-Mihdhar, because they were the ones who told the CIA about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi in the first place. because they were listening to the phone calls of an Al Qaeda communications hub in Yemen. So the NSA and the CIA and the Saudis now, they all knew. And if you want to throw in the Israelis in there, it doesn't talk about the Israelis in the document, but I can't dismiss it.
Claim to the FBI, because the FBI has responsibility for operations inside the U.S., and the CIA is not supposed to do that.
That's right.
So the CIA hired Bayoumi, a Saudi official, to
Well, they didn't hire him. He's not on CIA payroll. He's actually getting paid from a company that he worked for 20 years, which is the Saudi Arabian National Airlines, and he's a ghost employee at Dal Avco. Dal Avco is considered a front company, according to, I think, CS3, as a Saudi CIA front. But when the FBI went to interview in the Operation Encore investigation, they interviewed employees at Dal Avco and said that they barely knew who Omar al-Bayoumi was. So it's an actual company, and the CIA didn't own the company, Saudi Arabian company, but actually this company was in the employer of this company, Omar al-Bayoumi, is basically hired by Saudi Kingdom government officials to get money from this company to probably pay Khalid al-Mihdhar. But that wasn't the only company. I mean, you had the Saudi Arabian presidency. They're the ones who gave him the most money. Plus, there was also money coming from Haifa bin Faisal's bank account, which is owned by her husband, Bandar bin Sultan, the former U.S. Saudi ambassador to the United States. And that money was going to an associate of Omar al-Bayoumi, Osama Basnan's wife, Moida Douijak, and that money went to Omar al-Bayoumi's wife. And later on, FBI investigated Omar al-Bayoumi, and he said, oh, this money was actually going through medical procedures. Did it go to Khalid al-Mihdhar al-Hazmi? We can't prove that because it probably went as cash, but we do know that there was wire transfers to Osama Bassan's wife, and later transferred to Omar al-Bayoumi's wife.
To run this, because they're not supposed to be running operations inside the U.S. Well, what's really going on here? Those of us who've done the research in the 9/11 Truth Movement understand that the CIA was and had to be involved in the operation from its inception.
So you're assuming that the CIA, this is the problem with certain people in the 9/11 Truth Movement, is that they already claim that the CIA is involved with 9/11 right off the bat, and there's no evidence for this. That means that you would have to have classified information regarding signals intelligence or human intelligence that obviously you don't have, right? So you're just assuming that the CIA knew about the plane's operation, that they were in charge of the whole operation. That's why they were working with the Saudis to make sure that the hijackers were protected or shielded from the FBI. Here's another problem. Khalid al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi were involved with the hijacking of American Airlines Flight 77, which, Gage, you don't believe crashed into the Pentagon. Now, you could be somebody that has modified his position over the years. I don't know. That 77 was hijacked, but that it was replaced with a drone. But then again, you're taking that on faith because you don't have evidence of this. So,
and making it happen. That's what is shown. After all, the towers were blown up from top to bottom and from bottom to top in the third tower. So this is an inside operation, possibly also with help from foreign intelligence agencies. But the Saudis did not have access to the Saudi hijackers, or the Saudi officials did not have access to the most highly defended buildings in the world.
How do you know? In fact, according to William Rodriguez, janitor at the World Trade Center, he claimed to have seen one of the hijackers in the World Trade Center. I forgot who the hijacker was, but he claims to have saw one. You don't know. The hijackers themselves were casing airport security. You have no idea whether Saudi intelligence were working inside the World Trade Center, planting bombs or putting thermite somewhere. You don't know that. You can't make that assumption.
So clearly, it's the explosive demolition that proves that this is an inside job from beginning to end. And when you look at the behavior and the appearance of the planes coming in, it's most likely the case that the hijackers were not even on them.
See, you just ruined a good conversation. So I know you told me before that the 9/11 Truth Movement doesn't need official hijackers or legitimate hijackers on these planes. They don't even need the hijackers inside the planes themselves. That's what you told me once. And I said, well, why? Why is there such a desperate plea to not believe hijackers are involved? Because Richard Gage, if there's no hijackers, you can't tie this intelligence agency to the hijackers. You can't, right? Because if there's no hijackers inside the planes, what crime did these people commit? Nothing. There's no air piracy. If you're just saying that these planes are drones, well, who's controlling the drones, right? Well, we know they weren't drones because we have the analytical and technical evidence afforded to us by the National Transportation Safety Board, the Federal Aviation Administration, and as well as employees of American and United who saw the hijackers at the airports on the day of 9/11, even on September 10th. Ed Nelson, who was a lead security manager at Dulles, basically said that on the day of 9/11, the FBI came to him after the events happened, and they were looking at the security video, and they were pointing out the hijackers in front of him. Eric Gill, who works for Argabright Security at Dulles, actually said on September 10th, when he was working the night position, he basically saw two of the hijackers of 6 men that were trying to get into the tarmac area where the planes are being prepped for the next day. He was interviewed by the FBI. Vaughn Alex, who's an American Airlines ticket agent, actually gave boarding passes to Nawaf and Salim Al-Hazmi, the brothers. They were involved with the hijacking of Flight 77. We have security camera at Dulles showing Khalid Al-Mihdhar, Majid Market, Nawaf Al-Hazmi, Salim Al-Hazmi, and Hani Hanjour, and possibly a 6th hijacker, Mozed Kaner. And how do we know that? Is because in that Dulles security video, we see passengers of Flight 77 like Marie Ray Sopper, who's holding our cat in the red cargo holder. Not to mention the FBI and Fort Belvoir and Montgomery Search and Rescue, as well as Dover Mortuary, were in charge of collecting human remains and identifying them through DNA samples that were given to them by the families who arrived at the Pentagon, giving them toothbrushes, hairbrushes, to see if the loved ones are on the plane. And they all got death certificates. I think they couldn't identify 1 or 2 people. One of them being a baby, just disintegrated. So we know there's hijackers on these planes. And phone calls too prove that the planes were hijacked. So I don't know where you get this. I don't know why you push this no hijacker claim, because no one's going to take you seriously, Richard Gage. Nobody. I mean, you're going to be stuck in, on right-wing media that will entertain these theories. Who does the same thing? Alex Jones, Jim Fetzer. You want to be in the same venue as them? So you got to get off this no hijacker theory, because the evidence is overwhelming. So this whole document, which shows that the CIA and Saudis were working together in shielding the hijackers from the State Department and the FBI and local law enforcement, right? For what? To do what? To not hijack the planes? Does that make any sense? You got to kill these people anyway. Why not just allow the simple happen, right? Allow these people not to be detained or subjected to an investigation by domestic agencies. CIA and Saudi intelligence were doing just that. That's why they were doing it, I think. Have them hijack the planes, make sure they get on the planes, and then allow them to be flown, hijacked, and have them crash without any interference with air defense. And that's exactly what happened. You got to kill everybody anyway. Why do you need the swap over theory, right? If you got the swap over theory, now you got to get the NTSB, the FAA, FBI, and then all these, public. And I said this yesterday on the Jason Burma's video too. You got to get so many people involved with the cover up, and also public officials on the ground that saw plane debris from the hijacked plane. All these people got to stick with the story for 22 years. How do you do that? The easy thing to do is allow the hijackers to hijack planes and allow them to crash. Everyone's dead, and then you can feign ignorance.
That they were remotely guided and that they were outfitted on military bases to be much more precise, because most pilots agree that they couldn't hit a 200-foot wide target at 500 miles an hour.
Well, that's not true. The only group that says this is Pilots for 9/11 Truth, which was created way back in like 2004 or something like that, under Rob Balsamo, who has passed away, I think a year or two ago. And basically, he's not even a commercial pilot, right? And these are like people that, believe in the most ridiculous of things. And there's only like 6 or 7 of them, right? The majority of airlines that you're saying, that's not true. One of the largest unions for airline industry, the AIA. And basically, they have their own website, and they touched on this issue. And they have no problem with it. Neither do United and American Airlines. I don't see this a whole majority of pilots over the years basically saying, hey, they couldn't do that. You never heard that as a general consensus in the airline community. Never happened. So basically, that's not true what you're saying. It's not true. And to assume it and to state it as fact would be disingenuous.
And it's also,
they tried in simulators.
In the
yeah, well, guess what? There's videos of amateurs who use simulations to mimic that of the flight data flight data recorder of Flight 77. And they hit the Pentagon numerous times. It's not hard at all. They didn't reach their target at 500 miles an hour until they were seconds away from it. When it comes to Flight 77, remember that long loop that certain people like you say that can't be replicated? Well, that was a slow loop. And then when it descended back into Arlington County, then they hit the gas, right? But they didn't reach maximum speeds until they were seconds away from impact. Because obviously, going 500 miles an hour wasn't recorded at the flight data recorder.
Operation Northwoods, it talked about a remote controlled civilian plane being used to cause terrorist attacks. And so piecing this all together, because, okay, so let's say the journey of understanding this, it's like, at first it's, okay, there's no way the US government's involved. And then you start to kind of piece it all together. It's like, okay, it definitely was an inside job of some sorts with involving the CIA, the Saudi government, probably Israeli intelligence, etc. But there's 2 questions I have. Who, in your research, who do you think was really behind it? Like, who was the who was the puppet master that orchestrated the entire event? And this may not be an easy question to answer, but the other question is why? Why would, say it was a CIA or the DoD, why would our own government cause a terrorist attack that took thousands of lives on American soil?
Now, an honest person will say, one, I don't know who. It's alleged that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed brought the idea to Osama bin Laden and Mohammed Atef, the Al Qaeda military commander, in 1999, using the idea from a previous intercontinental airline conspiracy called Bajinka Plot, which basically had a hidden compartment to that plot in which there were going to be 10 planes that were going to be hijacked and crashed all over the United States. He brought that idea to Osama bin Laden in 99. All right. Is it a stretch? No, not really. I mean, but we really can't prove it, right? Nothing in writing, documentation. So an honest person will say, I really don't know. Second answer to that question is why they would do it. Well, basically to take advantage of the fact that we can now engage with Muslim countries that harbor terrorism by using speculative thoughts or tortured confessions or just outright lies. And that's exactly what happened. We engaged with Afghanistan because we said Al Qaeda training camps were there. Then after that was Iraq, which had nothing to do with 9/11. And then later on, after the Bush administration, during the Obama administration, we invaded Libya and Syria. And we had drone strikes in Pakistan. So what this did was basically gave the Department of Defense and private military industrialists like Raytheon and Boeing and LG3 Technologies carte blanche to produce weapons, which basically provided a profit for these companies. At the same time, you have foreign governments like Israel and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf. That's Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Qatar. And you got these countries that basically want to see the destabilization of the Middle East to where Saudi Arabia is reigning supreme. And that's a religious war. Israel basically wants to see all of the Arab world destroyed because they consider them all the enemy. Talk about the governments, not the people, right? So and then with the Bush administration, they're led by dual Israeli citizens and neocons, Richard Pearl, Douglas Feith, Paul Wolfowitz, Dov Zakheim. So Richard Armitage, all these people, vampires. So basically, there's a lot of interests here.
Well, we have to look at what happened following 9/11 to see what they had, what were they trying to engineer? What is the outcome that they needed to have such an incredible theater of false flag operation? We've got the invasion of the Middle East, Afghanistan and Iraq. We've taken over the opium production in Afghanistan, which skyrocketed following the Taliban's ouster under U.S. control. All
right, not necessarily true. You're close. The British and American armies, the coalition partners, right, took control of the Helmand province, which is the largest opium field on earth. It's also used for opium trafficking for drug traffickers that work separate outside the Taliban. There's a couple of, it's been rumored that the Taliban dabbled into drug running, opium trade through the Baluchistan border into China, right? So you have basically, I don't say you're wrong, but it's not as easily explained as this. So how can I put it in this manner? So the Taliban were in 1999, 2000, actually burned like 20% of the opium fields. And it was led by the leader at the time, Mohammed Mullah Omar. Because what they didn't want was basically their own fighters, because they were fighting for the country against the Northern Alliance for control. They didn't want their fighters to basically dabble into drugs, or the people, these Pashtun farmers, dabbling into drugs, because they were a religious authority and they wanted to use old Hanafi traditions that predate even Islam. But in 2001, obviously, after 9/11, we invaded the country, U.S. and coalition partners invaded the country, and then all of a sudden, we have British military officers and U.S. officers, military personnel, stationed in Helmand province. And I want to say it was Salon magazine. I'm wrong about it's a big publication that did a story on this, and soldiers actually complained, what are we doing here guarding poppy fields? So that's all I wanted to say.
By orders of magnitude greater production than it was when the Taliban was there. We have the assumption of the oil production in Iraq. We have the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, which crippled our civil liberties. Any of us now can be arrested without a right to a lawyer, a trial, a jury. We can even be tortured and assassinated. So civil liberties, and that, of course, set the way for the loss of our civil liberties through COVID in the last couple of years, which there's tremendous number of parallels between the false flag operation of COVID and that of 9/11. So you look at who could have engineered this. You look at the Project for a New American Century, PNAC.org, who still has on their website their goals for a vast increase in the military budget and the regional hegemony in the Middle East. Goals that they stated on their website would take a long time to achieve, absent a catalyzing and catastrophic event like a new Pearl Harbor. And Bush writes in his memoirs the next day, or his diary, today we had our new Pearl Harbor. Well, those individuals who are the signers of the PNAC document were brought in with the Bush administration to assume positions of leadership. And so Key, Wolfowitz, and others, Cheney, a key neocon, if he wasn't a signer on that, he should have been. So Rumsfeld, they produced what they needed to happen in the world, and trillions also, not just gold heists under the Twin Towers, under the Building 6, which was also controlled. It was also demolished in a controlled demolition. But bonds that were due on 9/11 didn't have to be repaid. Bonds that were used to take down the Soviet Union. This is documented by James Corbett in his great treatise video on YouTube. 9/11 trillions. Follow the money.
Okay. So that was basically at the end, right? So let's address some points here. One, the assumption that the Project for New American Century was behind the orchestration of 9/11. Based on what? The website doesn't work anymore, I don't think. It hasn't been operable for a little while. And also in their document, never states that they were behind the 9/11 attacks. So unless it states that, I don't know where you got that from, right? If you're going to speculate, say that you do. Don't be like Jason Burbis. He says he speculates and tells his audience, and he never does. It's fine if you speculate. You want to say, hey, I think, this and that, but it's all speculation. Don't say it like it's a matter of fact. Your opinions are not matter of fact. The Project for New American Century basically was a neocon think tank that was created in 1997 under Robert Kagan and William Crystal, who are still alive, by the way. There's other directors like, Bruce Jackson and John Bolton. These are the real villains of the United States because they're the ones who pushed the United States for war with their draconian foreign policy, especially when it comes to Russia and the Middle East. And we're seeing a revisitation of that with, the latest conflict in Ukraine, which is being used as a springboard for the United States to try and destabilize to Russia, right? But the Project for New American Century was basically a call for regime change in Iraq under Saddam Hussein. This actually began even further than that, started with the first Bush administration back in, remember February 26, 1993, when the World Trade Center was bombed? Well, it was blamed on Iraq. People like Laurie Melroy, a neocon chicken hawk, blamed Iraq for the bombing of the Oklahoma City bombing and the World Trade Center on Iraqis. And she wasn't the only one. Later on, you had the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which basically was leaked by, I think, the New York Times, which basically called for policy and regime change in Iraq. The destabilization of the Ba'athist regime and the Shia minority strongholds that were in countries like Libya and Syria. But again, if you want to even go further than that, the Oded Yanon plan, which was basically a doctrine by Oded Yanon, and it called for what? Regime change in the Middle East. That predated the Bush administration, the first Bush administration. But it never really took off. But a lot of those guidelines in the Oded Yanon plan, the Paul Wolfowitz Doctrine, and the Project for New American Century all seem to have come to fruition, most of it anyway. And as for this, but if you're going to say that, the participants or the co-signers of the PNAC document are the ones who are responsible for orchestrating 9/11, good luck. Try that in court. Second point that you raised was about I have brain fart just now. What was the second part I was going to talk about? I seem to have forgotten. Oh, wow. What was that? We'll have to go back to that. Let's take a revisitation. Wow, I just lost my train of thought.
The Twin Towers under the Building 6.
Oh yeah,
which was also controlled.
That's right. The gold that was under World Trade Center 6. So yeah, the New York Times reported that the gold, which was from I think a Switzerland bank, it was locked in vaults, and the vaults were actually torched open. And this happened in the days after 9/11, or in the evening of September 11, 12, and that the Secret Service came and they retrieved all the gold and actually went back to the Bank of Nova Scotia. That's right, the Bank of Nova Scotia. So there was no gold heist. And if you're going to say James Corbett said that, I don't think James Corbett ever said that. But then again, it's been years since I saw that video you referred to, 9/11 followed the trillions. And I don't know if he said that on there. But yeah, there was no gold heist. The gold out of World Trade Center 6 was retrieved by Secret Service and given back to the Bank of Nova Scotia. And the chairman of the Bank of Nova Scotia actually said in the New York Times article that they were thankful and they got the gold back. So there was no gold heist. I don't know where you got that from. Anyway, that's it. That's all we got. That's all in this video. Hey, at least they talked about the Canestraro document. So some credit to both gentlemen for doing just that. See you in the next video, guys. Take care.